Here we go. Hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm joined by our Director of Customer Success, Sarah Mitchell. Today we're going to start on a series of, not necessarily sequential, but a series of webinars that are going to be aimed at one feature in particular in Alpha Transform, and that's the ability to do offline database lookups. This, as it turns out, the more people use it, the more they realize that this is an incredibly powerful feature. So it lets you do things, for example, like scan a barcode on a piece of equipment and have it automatically fill in fields on a form, giving you the serial number, maybe the service history, the model, the make, and things to look out for when performing maintenance. That's just one example. Another example might be looking up a customer by their phone number when you're out in the field on a sales call. Well, back when we used to do those in person, but we do still do them in person from time to time, and looking up and seeing what their order history was. And there are a lot of other examples as well. But it takes a little bit to set them up, and so it involves creating something called a SQLite database, and it involves putting that SQLite database on a place that the phone app, in other words, the Transform mobile app, can download, access, and use using TPL. So today we're going to dive right into a fairly technical demonstration. And in fact, this is a Encore presentation. It's a presentation that we did back in September of 2020, almost a year and a half ago. But I think it's going to make a very good review and a very good starting point for our follow-up webinars. Of course, if you do have any questions during this time, we're here to answer those questions. So you can go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. And as a reminder, you can always send questions to tfservice@alphasoftware.com. Okay, so we have talked in the past, and I've given a demo on using SQLite databases with Alpha Transform. And you can do all kinds of cool things. The common example is doing barcode lookups, for example. So in other words, you have a field for doing a barcode lookup on your Transform form, and it goes into an on-device database and it finds out information associated with that barcode. It might be a piece of equipment, it might be a product, it could be anything really. And so last week we got an email from someone who said, oh, look, can you point me to the documentation for the phone for in TPL for using the SQLite commands? And we said, sure. And then we realized, oops, we didn't actually have that documented. We've done examples of it, we've done webinars of it, we've done sample forms of it, and we even have it in our user's guide. By the way, if you don't have the Transform user's guide, please send an email to tfservice@alphasoftware.com and we'll send that along. It's a good asset to have. So Sarah, in charge of documentation, went through and not only created the documentation, but also created a really nice sample form that she's going to show you a little bit later in today's presentation. So let me just go through a quick outline of what we would like to talk about. Over the next couple of sessions, we're going to go into building a SQLite database or SQL database, setting up a bucket on Amazon S3, uploading a database to that bucket, and creating the manifest and policy files that Transform needs to make these work. And then we'll dive into the TPL code. So today we're going to talk about a couple of these. So we're not going to do them in exact order, but first we're going to talk about just building a SQL database. So let's just jump right into it. So here I am in Alpha Anywhere. And first of all, just as a show of hands, or just a yes or no, how many people here have Alpha Anywhere installed? I know some people only use Transform, but looks like a good number of you. Fantastic. So Alpha Anywhere is our low-code platform. It's used for building mobile apps, but also building web apps as well, whereas Transform is limited, at the moment at least, just doing mobile applications. It's more of a coding-intensive product, but it has a little bit more flexibility than Transform. One thing, though, that it also has is a collection of tools that you can use with Transform to make your Transform apps better. And one of them is the on-device data builder, and another one has to do with building SQL Server databases. So let me just go ahead into the Web Projects control panel here. And we're going to go over to create a SQLite database. Okay. So a SQLite database is similar to a regular SQL database. If you're familiar with SQL Server or MariaDB or MySQL or any of the other ones, it's actually a database that's meant to run right on the phone itself, which is why it's light, because computers aren't, the computer of a phone is not as powerful as your desktop computer. But it's still really very powerful, can easily hold millions of records. It can be searched quickly. It's a really terrific piece of software, SQLite. And it's a plugin which is, or it's a capability which comes installed when you install Alpha Transform. So the question is, how do you get data from a data source into a SQLite database? And today, I think in the past I did an example using either the Northwinds database, which was a Microsoft Access database, but I realized that an awful lot of time people are actually just getting information right off of spreadsheets. I mean, that's probably the lowest common denominator way of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and today show you a spreadsheet example. And I think I've got an Excel spreadsheet, I do, right here, set up. And it's got a whole bunch of fake data in it. It's got fake first names, last names, emails, and phones. And I got this from a site called Mockaroo. I'm going to paste that into the chat window in a moment. And it's actually really terrific if you need to make sample data. This is a terrific site for that. All right, well, enough about that. Assuming that you have this data, let's pretend it's real data here. And it's saved as an XLS file, a Microsoft Excel file. The first thing we're going to do in Alpha Anywhere is we're going to build a connection, a data connection string to that source. And we'll do that by going into Tools and choose Alpha DAO connection strings. I already have one set up, but I'm going to do a new one just to remind you how it's done. We're going to call this mock data 2. And now here are all the different types of data sources that I can select from. And you'll notice that one of them happens to be Excel. So I'm going to choose Excel. And now that I've selected Excel, this next dialog box asks me the connection information for my Excel file. And in this case, all I need to do is provide it with a file name. If this were a SQL Server database, it would ask me for the location of the SQL Server, whether it's an IP address or whatever, as well as a username and password. In this case, we just need a file name. So here under file name, I'm just going to choose my spreadsheet. There it is, mockdata.xls. And I'm going to click the test connection button to make sure that I've done it properly. And you'll see that it's succeeded. And now I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to click OK again. And there's our connection string for mock data. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to take that data and I want to put it into a new SQLite database. So I'm going to go into Tools, More, and remember what I was telling you that there were some helper functions built into Alpha Anywhere, some helper tools. You'll find them here under the Tools, More, and then Transform Utilities. There are a couple here, but there's also one up here called Create SQLite Database. That's the one we're going to use. So I click on that, and now I'm going to click Add Table. And it's going to ask me for a name. I'm going to call it Mock Data 2. Great. Now, I've given it a name, but I haven't given it any information there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some data, generate import definition from a connection string. And here I'm going to do, let me just take you through this again because sometimes it's a little bit confusing. Now that I'm in the Create SQLite database, I want to import my data. So I'm going to click Import. Here it's asking for a bit of JSON, but I'm not going to even get into how you define that because there's a helper here that'll do that called generate import definition from a connection string. And now here is where I enter my connection string. Now there's no, you have to remember what it is. There's no drop down to choose from your selected connection strings yet. It is a feature we are requesting and will be put in at some point. So if you're watching this on video, maybe it'll be there by the time you see it. So I'm going to click OK. And now here we go. Generate import definition from a connection string has generated this set of JSON, which really just points to where my database is. So this is all stuff you don't have to write. We write that for you. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to actually delete that because I did not need to make that. And we've got this one right here. So now let's make sure that that's good. Let's go ahead and preview the data. And there's all of the data that I had in my spreadsheet. It's now in a SQLite table. So now that that's done, I just click Create SQLite Database. Oops, now I can give it a name. I'm going to call this mock data 2. One thing I'd like to point out about SQLite databases is they are case sensitive in every way you can imagine. Database names, table names, field names. So it's good to stick, all lowercase, camel case, whatever you want, but it's good to just keep that in mind later on. Whoops, made a little error here. That's all good. Huh. Well, that's not supposed to happen. In fact, I had one working just just moments ago. I'm not quite sure what I did here. Let me just pop back in here and try it again. Tools, more, transform utility, create SQLite database, add table, oops, import, sorry, generate my, mock data 2. Okay. There it is. Mock data 2, create. Oh, all right. Well, I'm sorry. This is in fact the correct way of doing it. I know that because I created one before. So that's no good. Anyway, let me go and show you what happens. After this is after this occurs, after it creates an action, it then opens up the folder in which you put the database. And let's see if I can find that. Nope, that's fine. That's great. That always happens during a demo. Well, my apologies. I will find that and fix that for next time we go around. Anyway, once that's created, the next steps that you would do, let's go back to the PowerPoint here, is PowerPoint, is you would upload that database that you created, or in my case, failed to create, and create a manifest and a policy for that. I'm going to show you how you do that later. And then after that, you'd start getting into the TPL code, and that's the stuff that's been recently documented. So we're going to go into an example there. So let me see if Sarah is ready to help us out. She just had a brand new machine, so she was setting up some software so she could share her device. But Sarah, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Are you ready to give a little demo of the stuff that you put together?
Yeah, so yeah.
Great.
Let's do it.
I know, I did like that pause though, that caveat. All right, so I've go ahead, I made you the presenter, so just you should see a dialog box to share your screen.
Show my screen. Can you see my screen?
I see a blue screen with nothing on it. I bet you've got
Oh,
two
excellent.
monitors.
All right.
That's the one you want?
I have
Okay.
it didn't give me a choice.
Oh,
So,
well. Now
um
I can see your screen and I can see the
all right.
designer tab of Alpha Transform and Transform Central.
Mhm.
Oh, and a picture of a bridge.
Yeah, let's go check out Transform documentation, and I'm gonna quickly blast through here
Okay.
because I know exactly what I'm looking for. All right. So once you have a SQLite database on your device, you can use this function in TPL called PhoneGap TF execute SQL to execute queries against it. And just so you know, this is an experimental feature right now. It's under active development. We continue to improve it. But what I wanted to show you is just how to do some basic queries against a TPL or a SQLite database. And these examples here are going to use the classic Northwinds database from ye old days of Access. I converted it into a SQLite database and I put it in my Transform account. And I'm just going to walk through these examples that we've got in here, minus the last one. This one is more complex, but if you're interested in learning more about how to use this function to populate a drop-down list, that's what this final example down here shows. A little bit more about the function. It requires the name of the SQLite database that you've added to your account that's on the device and the SQL statement that you want to execute. That SQL statement can include one or more arguments, and that is done by using the question mark operator to specify an argument. So an argument would be something like where country equals question mark, and the question mark is the country name, and you want to populate that dynamically, either from a drop-down field in the form, or maybe you go off and scan a barcode and you'd like to look up some data from a barcode table using that barcode. So that's you can use an argument to basically dynamically define that that query. And if you have more than one argument, you can just specify it using multiple question marks. When you pass in multiple arguments, it's just another argument, the argument 1 followed by argument 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you have, separated by a comma. The function assumes that the order that the arguments are passed in is the order that they appear in the query. Just keep that in mind. And that's basically how this function works. Being a SQLite database, you need to use SQLite syntax, which has some limitations. It doesn't have everything in it that the full SQL language has, and you can go to SQLite's website to learn more about that. And I believe, yeah, here we go. And that's just SQLite.org is where you can find out all the technical details about the language that they use for SQLite databases. So that's the function. I'm gonna grab this link for you guys and drop it in the chat. And if you just want to search the page for PhoneGap, you should find that. Oops, that is not the chat window. If you just search for PhoneGap, you should find that function right away. So the example I have is this form. Make that a little bit bigger. This is called my SQLite demos form, and it shows a few examples. It shows selecting 5 customers. It shows using arguments to select some customer information, and it also shows how to populate that query from a value selected by the user in a dropdown. And hold on, my phone just went to sleep on me. There we go. And I wanted to show, see if I can get mirroring back up over here.
Yeah.
Please wait. I want to show you how this form works in operation before we go into the code.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work on your phone, I happen to have yours on my phone. If you want to walk me through I could do a screen share.
Yeah, hold on a sec. I need to do some magic here.
But I haven't given up.
I gotta relaunch it. It timed out on me.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully I don't have to restart my whole phone.
Yeah. Which screen sharing software are you using?
I have Lonely Screen on here right now.
Oh, okay. I use Air Server typically for that.
There we go. I got it.
All right.
And I tried to turn off notifications on my phone in general, but
yeah,
hopefully nothing pops up.
Aha, there we go.
So
I see your phone now. Yep.
Here's my phone. All right, so I've sort of like pre-filtered this, so the only one we see in there is that SQLite demos, but I'm gonna add a new one of these demo forms, and we're just gonna go through the examples. So the way it works is that each one of these examples has a button you press, and it shows the result in this text area called result. Right now it's blank, but for like this basic example where it selects all the records from customers, the first 5, when I run that, what I've set it up to do is just show you all the JSON of the records that came back. So these are those first 5 records from that database in that form. The next example is a little more complicated. It's gonna find all the customers with a customer ID that contains the letter A and who are also located in the country Spain. And so these are those customers. There's only two.
Hmm.
There's customer name FISSA. I don't know if you can see that in there, and then also GALED down here. So that's the super basic example. This one's using the arguments. This next one actually asks you to select a location. So you tap on select location and you can come down here and say Sweden. And I'm gonna click OK. And then I'm gonna ask to run the example. It's gonna show me all the customers from Sweden. And there they are. And there's just two of them. You can go in here and change it. Let's go back to Spain. So then there's all of our customers from Spain. Oh, and this one I did do it. Okay, there's also an example of here of populating a customer list with the data.
Right.
So this is all the customers, but you'll notice it includes their city and their country in there as well. And then if you select one and click OK, it shows the customer ID in the list back on the form. So
Oh, I see.
here you see a different value.
So it selects the key field, but you're actually
Yeah.
just choosing on the friendly name of the customer and
Yeah,
the
so I show you the
address.
friendly name of the selection, but the actual stored value is going to be the customer's ID.
Hmm. That's
So
cool.
yeah, and
So you're
in
gonna
here,
show us how it works.
yep. I'll show you the form commands first.
Uh-huh.
I have these buttons in here. They all say run example, but in order to run an action, you have to give it an action name. Otherwise, you can't do anything. So
And
this one's
I'd like
called
to point
select
out,
one.
by default, when you put in a button, I don't think it actually fills in the action name.
No, it's
So
blank.
it's blank. So
It's
you can't
blank,
even
yeah.
refer to it in code. So that's ideally it wouldn't work that way, but just to make sure that you fill in an action name. Otherwise, you're not gonna. Well, it's
Yeah,
not
and
gonna
the
work.
action name can contain letters and numbers. I believe it has to start with a letter. It can't contain any spaces. Don't put underscores in it. Just keep it simple. Um, but each one of these has that action, and then the result field is just a text area. And then I used an instructions to explain what it's going to do when you tap that button. And that layout's repeated for all these things. The list for select location, I actually went in and I built that list from the SQLite database because I knew it was going to be static. And then I put it in here manually. And then this customers list down here, it has some data in it, but that gets overwritten when the control is shown.
Mhm.
So to view the code or even to add code, you need to go in a form, you need to go into advanced features. You need to make sure that enable custom code for this form type is set to yes. And then you click edit custom code and that will open up the TPL editor. And all of those, all that TPL, with the exception of the customers list, has been added to the buttons event for my run example buttons. And I'm gonna see if I can make that bigger. Oh, I made it too big.
Dude, you've gone too far.
I've gone too far. Make a little bit smaller. There we go.
Yeah,
So this
that's
is that
readable.
first example where it
Mhm.
selects 5 customers. And this is all that really needed to happen. I tell it it's my SQLite Northwind DB, which this is the name I gave the database when I put it up in Amazon S3 and specified it in my on-device assets policy. This is the SQL statement I want to execute. I then run the PhoneGap tf execute SQL function. It's going to return an object that contains all those records. And then I use this JSON stringify to convert that object into text, so I can set that. So I can show the results in that results1 text area. And if you want to know syntax for things like how do I set the value of an existing field in my form, if you go over here and you click on the Fields tab, it will show you the different fields you have and what's available to you. So that's the hashtag and then the field. field name, I think, is what you would use there.
And you can click on one of those to insert it if you want to as well.
Yeah, there. Yeah, you can just click on it.
Yeah.
And it'll just add it for you.
Great.
Cancel, so I don't save that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is that first one, the select. The second example where I do arguments, it's a little more complicated, but not much more. I say where customer ID is like question mark argument 1 and country is like question mark argument 2, and then I define my arguments here. So this is like %A% means match anything before the A, anything after the A. As long as it contains the A, it's gonna match. If you remove the %, it will match anything that starts with A. And if you remove the last one, it'll match anything that ends with A. So this is how you would write anything that contains, or is using the like operator. And then the second argument is just straight up Spain. It's hard coded in there. And again, here's that PhoneGap TF execute SQL statement. I pass in my database, my SQL statement, and then the arguments in the order that they appear in the query. So my first one is customer ID, so that's argument 1. And my second one is country, Spain, argument 2. And then again, I just JSON stringify the results and put it in my text area. And then this last button example, the run example 1, is a little more complicated. It's actually got some error tracking in it to make sure you select a location. If you don't select a location from that location dropdown, it's not going to work. Where country equals nothing isn't going to give us any good results. So I check to make sure that the location field has a value, and I do this by checking to see if its length, the length of the text in that field, is less than or equal to 0. Meaning it's blank. If it's blank, then I say, please select the location, and that's what gets shown in that result 2 text box. Otherwise, I just execute the SQL query where arg1 is the value from location, and then I stringify the results into the message, and that gets set into result 2. Were there any questions about those 3 specific examples?
Oh yeah. Could you show the link on how to get to the PhoneGap execute documentation?
Yes, I pasted that into the chat window. You should have
yep,
that
I
in
see
your.
I see it right here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's down there in chat. That's the only question so far. So
Okay.
so far so good.
All right. So the last one's a little different. It looks a little more complicated, but it's not it's not super difficult. When a list is shown, when the list of choices for a list editor field is shown, it calls this event called editor, and you can use this event to change what options are shown. Sorry, in the dropdown, using this special QList property. And the way you get at that is you need to take args1, which is the first argument passed into this event, and assign it to a local variable. And what this gives you is basically a pointer to that list so that you can change its options. And so some of this should look familiar to you already. To populate that list of customers, I go into my local database here. I get the customer ID, the contact name, the city, and the country from the customers table, and then I execute that to get that data. And now after I've gotten that data, I need to process it. So first thing I'm going to do is make this thing called data. I'm going to make it an array because that's what this QList is. It's an array of name value objects that contain a text and a value property in them. And I'm going to make this new array and override the existing array in that list with those new values that I want to display. So this first if statement just checks to make sure that there are any results in my query. If there aren't any, I don't want to I don't want to try to like run through it because there's going to be nothing to process. So in that case, I say the first entry in my data array is an object and its value is no customers. And that's all I need to do here. Sorry, I don't know how to turn this off. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry sorry about that, guys. So I create one entry to say there's no customers. I assign that to my list, and then we exit. Otherwise, if we do have results, I come down here to this, and I go through each one of those records in our results, and I add an entry to our data array. So this is a for loop. So it needs where you're going to start, where you're going to end, and it's a for and end for, and inside is going to be where we do all the building of our array. So first I get the current row from SQL results by pulling that out of the array of objects. And then I build my text. Text is what's shown. And I want it to be the contact name concatenated with a colon and a space. And then I want to show the city and a comma and the country. And then the value, I want that to be the customer ID. So this, when you're building these up, in these references, it's really, really important that the case that you use is identical to the case in your SQLite database for your column names, because if it doesn't match, you're going to get nothing. If one of the things I ran into is I kept typing a lowercase d and the value was always blank, and it's because there was no customer ID with a lowercase d, it was uppercase D. So just keep that in mind when you're working with this, that this is case sensitive. But no.
Now, to be clear, in those rows above, you have one called, but one called text and one called value. And text is what the user sees, and value is what gets stored in the database. Okay, gotcha.
Right, and that's what this is doing down here when it adds that entry. So when you're building up that list to display in your list of choices, you have to have value. Text is optional. And every entry in that list can either be just a value with a value, or text value for those entries. And to add an object or create an object, use the obj function. And then in that you can pass in the name of the property you want to create and its value, and you can do multiple by just adding more commas. So that's how you add this, and then this is going to loop through all those results, and at the very end it's going to assign it in a queue list.
And I see this is a zero-based array
It
when
is.
you're working here. Yep, which is why you have starting at 0 in the for loop, but also the -1 at the end, because you're starting at 0 and you would be off by 1.
Oh yes, -1. Yeah.
Yep. Great. So we have very, very cool. Excellent. Welcome back. I've been told my my live voice and the recording are two very different levels, so I'm sorry if I blasted you out of your seats when the recording portion began. I just wanted to let you know, though, if you didn't see it in the chat, that a copy of that form design that Sarah just showed you is available. Just send us an email to tfservice@alphasoftware.com, and we are happy to share our SQL Server examples with you. So thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Sarah. And I hope to see you all at our next Transform Tuesday. Until then, stay well. Take care. Bye-bye.